TNKR Media.
Welcome to Today's Entrepreneur, a program about the entrepreneurial spirit that drives Quebec business, presented by FL Montreal, season number 13, by the way. Dan Delmar and Euros Malekic sitting in for Mike Newton today. Euros, welcome back to Today's Entrepreneur. Nice to be with you.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks for having me on. I think it's been a full year almost since my last appearance, but these days it feels like it was yesterday.
Tell me about yourself real quick. You're a consultant at FL. How long have you been there? What is your area of expertise?
So I've been with the firm now for just over 13 years. My book of clients really ranges. I have companies that are small enough, just starting off, not necessarily incorporated, but need some guidance at the beginning stages of their growth. And then I have companies that are big enough to be public, but they're not. The common factor is they're all privately owned companies, a lot of family-owned businesses. So you see the different generations get involved, and it's really fascinating. I mean, what I like the most about what I do is being able to integrate myself into what clients are doing and add value. If I can add value, I need to be the first person to tell them that and then point them in the right direction. So I love helping people in any way I can, whether it's for their business or personal stuff. I'm here. If you have a question, I'll be happy to help walk you through it.
Great. So we have David Landry on the program today. He's the co-founder of Living Safe, a brand new company. So this is actually an all millennial show today. So I'm looking forward to this. And David is going to talk about these smart monitoring devices for the senior care industry. Living Safe is part of the Centec Group, which is an incubator that resides at the old planetarium, actually, in downtown Montreal. Government funded, privately funded, and an incubator for some really interesting tech businesses. So David will be along on the program as well. And later in the program, we'll talk to FL's expert on estates and trusts, and the importance of getting that straightened out as you sort of straighten out your financial affairs in general with business. First, the leadership, the thought leadership segment, as we call it, Euros, or the thing we call thought leadership, because we don't love that term here on Today's Entrepreneur. But nonetheless, you brought this story to the table from Fast Company, and I think it's great because you are very much a motivational guy. I've seen you with clients, and you like to motivate them. And this piece is about procrastination from Fast Company. Procrastination is an emotional problem. If you are managing someone who is procrastinating or not getting their work done on time or seems unmotivated or otherwise just not into it, what can you do with that? And how can you help them?
Right. So I think, the first point is that I'm sure that we can all admit to having procrastinated with something at some point in time. It is like what this article is saying is it's really an emotion management problem. The success, like you have a task at hand, there's a project to be done, you forecast that it's going to be painful. And so your mind tries to have you avoid that pain or discomfort. So you just end up delaying the task at hand. And that's really the issue. So the solution is the success factor to go around that is breaking down what that task or project is into smaller milestones. And then as you achieve these smaller milestones, you have a sense of satisfaction. And that's what keeps you going and motivated. What I like to do, Dan, and we've spoken about this, off a show in the past, is I like to keep tabs on what I have to do. So as things come in, I'm a little old school in the sense that I keep an Excel sheet going of my to-do list, essentially. So I add things to that and I take them off as I complete tasks, and I can easily move things around. I realize that there's more sophisticated ways of getting that done these days. But like I said, I'm a little old school. So I use an Excel sheet. I used to use, you're showing me people, the listeners can't see it, but you're showing me a pen and paper. So
my to-do list is right here on my notepad every day.
I've evolved from that, Dan. You'd be happy for me. But really what it does is it brings things into perspective in terms of what is the big picture of what you have to do in a given day or week or month. And it allows you to prioritize those tasks. If you don't see the full picture of what you need to do, then you may fail in prioritizing because you might give something priority, but in the grand scheme of things, it's really not that important. So that's what's been working for me over the last few years. and I keep doing that. Stick, if it's not broken, don't fix it. So yeah, that's what's good for me. And obviously applying hard deadlines to yourself sort of forces you into getting things into gear and getting stuff done.
I'm sure you agree, but the listing, especially to me, might be a pain in the butt at the beginning of your day sometimes, but it really creates a Zen atmosphere throughout your day when you know what you have to do that day and everything's under control. And it also mentioned that it's also good neuroscience, by the way. There's a book that I read this summer called Atomic Habits. And in Atomic Habits, they describe the benefits of listing and of creating a to-do list for yourself. And it also speaks about the benefits of what they call habit stacking. So getting into a routine where you're stacking one habit and one routine after the other. So I write my morning list, I have my tea, I walk the dog, etc., and works for me.
For sure. And I think another important aspect of the list is make room for things that are not expected. So that's one thing I realize as your responsibilities grow, there's a lot more unknown that can come your way. Versus when you're starting something off in your career, it's a lot more defined as to what you need to do and by when. But yeah, as things change and as your career evolves, it's more and more difficult. So you just need to keep up the pace and get better to make things look easier.
This story from Inc.com on the job shortage, which affects everyone really in North America, and it's hitting us hard here in Quebec as well. Whenever you drive to a commercial district or a small town, you're bound to see help wanted signs everywhere. This piece talks about rethinking hiring. What would you give Euros as advice to entrepreneurs who are looking for an edge, looking to just have a little leg up on their competition in terms of hiring?
I think the culture and the tone that's set at the top is extremely important. Like it's no secret right now. There's skilled labor shortage. There's a problem in terms of who's available to do the required skills for a particular job, and they may not meet what's required. So you're sort of just grabbing what you can in terms of team members potentially, and you may pay the price later. I think you can avoid that problem if you set up a culture within your company that's you have clear direction on where everyone's going. You're allowing people to grow and upskill. Opportunities are presented to the team members, because there's surveys and pollings that they've done to show that it's not always about money. It's easy to lose someone on money, but in order to really keep talented people, they're saying that nearly 2/3 of employees would leave their job if they're not presented with upskilling opportunities. So how do you solve that problem? You need to have training tailored specific to what people's needs are. Listen to your team members, find out what it is they want, identify potential problems before they come to fruition in a bad way, and be proactive with that. And then another possible solution to me is, instead of losing someone to a competitor, look at options. If they want to do something different than what they're doing now, is there an opportunity within your four walls in rotating roles, between departments, and having someone do something else for a change that they may be stronger at and that you just haven't seen because they've been in another role this whole time. So being open to those kinds of things and being flexible with your team members and trying to optimize everyone's strengths.
The conditions to attract and keep your top employees once you get them there, also from Inc.com. What are your thoughts on that? Because just as hiring is a problem, retaining is also a big problem right now.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to speaking with David on that later, and the eventual segment that we'll have, and speaking with him on his company. But I think you need to create again an environment where you're aligning everyone to the goal of the company. Creating a sense of belonging and accountability and commitment for everyone, following through on what you say you're going to do. Like, look, if you build an all-star team, no one's going to want to leave an all-star team. They're going to want to keep playing for that team and keep performing at the high level. You're setting certain expectations. But if you're sort of loosey-goosey with that stuff, then you're at risk of losing talent. So again, you got to really be in tune with your team members and not lose sight of that. I think the pandemic, if one thing, it was an eye opener into how important it is to give people feedback and stay in communication with them. And it doesn't, I mean, an email sometimes can get, lost. Pick up the phone, and face to face, obviously social distancing and whatnot. But I think it's important to stay in touch with your team members and identify things early before they become a problem.
And lastly, on the same theme, solidifying your team. If you can't get that top employee, if you can't develop new talent, well, you often have to rely on independent contractors. What are your thoughts on that, on basic rules there? Another story from Inc.com. I've certainly used a lot of independent contractors and had great experiences.
Yeah, that's a good one. You have to keep in mind the different criteria that they're in place. I mean, this article that you're referring to, I think, is based out of the U.S. They have similar, not the same criteria that we have here in Canada. Here in Canada, it depends on whether you're talking about a worker that's in Quebec or in Canada outside of Quebec. There's overlapping criteria, but they're not exactly the same. You gotta really look at what is the intent of a relationship. So is it a contract of service, which is really more of an employer-employee type relationship, or is it a contract for services, which is more of a business type relationship where you can argue that it's a contract worker? And the difference is, as an employer, you may prefer to have, there's other variables involved, but long story short, you may prefer to have a contract worker versus an employee. From a deductions at source perspective, there's costs involved for you for having an employee, but you need to be really careful with this stuff, because if you go down the rabbit hole of just saying everyone's a contractor when they're in fact not, you may pay the price later. It's going to be a much heftier price than what you thought you saved in not doing it properly. So the criteria are, just to sum it up quickly, is, you got to determine the intent. Like I said, you got to look at the level of control that the pair has over the worker's activities, who's providing the tools and equipment, the degree of financial risk that the worker takes, and things of that nature. And obviously, the agreement that you have in place with the workers is extremely important as well. So if you don't have a professional advisor, I suggest you seek one out to make sure that things are done properly so that you can go to sleep at night.
And also, just in terms of the relationship with them, I've noticed on my end, it helps to not give them too many responsibilities. Like I've seen some agencies give freelancers email addresses and Slack accounts and stuff like that. My advice would be to save those responsibilities for those that are on the team permanently. That's a little too much sometimes for freelancers to deal with.
Yeah, certain things. I mean, again, when you're looking at these criteria, and this is really if something goes under audit by a government auditor, they're going to look at all the facts and they're going to paint a picture of what they believe the relationship is. And if you don't have a position to argue, if you don't have things in your favor to argue the position that you've taken, well, then you're going to lose that argument, obviously. So things like you're describing may certainly not help your argument. So you got to be wary of everything, really.
Do invite them to the Christmas party, though, that you can do. And Euros, let's get right to our profile, shall we? He is a young entrepreneur, and so this is a startup show. We have with us David Landry, who's the founder of Living Safe. They do smart monitoring devices for senior care. David, welcome to today's Entrepreneur.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
So the first question is the very easiest. Just tell us what you do for a living. What is Living Safe?
Right. So I am David Landry. I'm the CEO and one of the founders of Living Safe. And essentially what we do is we've created a technology that, in the most private way possible, allows staff to get all the information and all the important information that they need from care units.
And tell me about what kind of technology you use. So you are using AI. What kind of data are you gathering?
Right. So that's a super interesting question. Essentially, the type of sensor that we do use in our technology is radar-based sensors. So no imaging, no cameras, nothing to wear on your body, and within 15 minutes, plug and play, install it on the wall, and essentially transforms a regular care unit into an intelligent unit.
David, so in terms of what's on the market right now, is there something similar as a product, I guess, that works differently or in the same fashion?
Right. So what we typically find inside care units today is very far from our technology. Um, Essentially, it's places where staff is limited, and on top of that, they're very limited in the type of tools that they have to get information on the residents. And so, even today, the best way they have of actually going to get the information that they need is when they physically go check up on every single resident.
Right, and that's obviously with limited staff, it becomes increasingly difficult to do exactly that. No, I could definitely see the need for something like this. You mentioned that the device is, or you were alluding to it, it's non-intrusive. So explain that a little more in terms of is there any certain barriers around this device, like specific materials that can infringe on it doing its job?
Okay, yeah. That is a very good question as well. So, what's very interesting about radar technology and radar waves in general is that it's able, depending on the frequency, to go through certain types of materials. In our case, yes, there is some materials that could limit this, but most materials inside care units allow us to go right through them, making our range of detection very interesting.
Okay, so the concept is you have these set up in a senior home, and they're in specific rooms, and the nurses that are working at this facility are made aware if there's an issue, if a person doesn't happen to be where they're supposed to be at a specific moment in time, they're made aware kind of in real time, and they can act on that.
That's exactly it. So once we've installed our devices into these units, from their device that they get the information on, they're able to now have insight on what's going on in real time in every single one of these units, allowing them to be just able to offer a better quality of care. They can increase the security for the residents and really just react much quicker when an event happens.
And is there, because there's always a concern from whether it's the children of the seniors at a specific facility, and how they're, the communication between the facility and these, let's say, the children. Is there a specific communication tool with respect to the device and those other people that are involved in the life of the senior? Like, are you able to bypass the facility with this device, or does it still have to be streamlined through, or can it be both?
So, if I understand your question correctly, for sure in the care unit setting, then it's absolutely streamlined directly with the staff, right? Just to be the most effective possible. Whereas this technology could absolutely be adapted for home care, for example, and then therefore the information will not necessarily go to staff, but maybe to family members, or even caregivers that come to the home.
Okay, so the capabilities there, great. No, definitely, because the point I was making is really sometimes it's difficult because the staff at a care facility is swamped, and they may be overwhelmed with their duties and responsibilities. And I think it's always a concern for the family members of an individual as to how they're doing, and instead of sort of bogging down the phone lines, if they're able to get an update. A safety update, I guess, using this device that you're producing, I think that's a huge advantage that I could see.
David, one question. Obviously, senior care, huge industry right now with the demographics being what they are. How did you find your way to this industry?
Right. So it actually came from a personal experience of mine. When I was 11 years old, we put my grandmother into a retirement home. It so happened that several months after that, she fell in the middle of the night. And since she was in an autonomous setting, they don't necessarily go check up on them as much. And unfortunately, she had to wait 12 hours before staff found her. So until the next morning when it was time to go eat. Naturally, when you suffer an injury and you need to wait 12 hours, like any type of injury will just, become worse. And if you're not able to react quickly to serious injuries, Well, in my grandma's case, it ends up being the event that really takes away her autonomy and really reduces her quality of life significantly. So that event, that experience, kind of always stuck with my family. And as I was studying to become an engineer, I was learning about all these interesting types of sensors and technologies that could be used. And right away, I did the link to this situation and how we could use technology to basically create something that's more autonomous, that the effectiveness of our solution doesn't rely on the seniors to, let's say, press a button or wear anything. So to truly make something that we believe could really improve the quality of care given to seniors.
That's amazing. Euros, how often do we see entrepreneurs that start a business based on a personal experience? It's such a great way to start your life's work.
Yeah, definitely, Dan. And, a lot of the success stories come in facing some sort of adversity, whether it's directly with you or someone that you know. And so certainly big success stories stemming from potentially situations that don't look like the best situations at the time, but will lead to something good. As they say, with something bad, there's always usually an upside somewhere down the road.
David, we'll come back and talk a bit more about marketing, getting the word out there. First, though, tell me about your involvement with Centec and your experience there. This is a government-funded incubator for young tech companies.
So, absolutely. Well, I actually studied engineering at ETS, which is the university that's kind of associated with Centec. And my last year, I realized the opportunity to really integrate the startup ecosystem, to get access to incredible mentors, to really start my education on how to build a strong foundation from a business perspective. And luckily, with a lot of hard work, me and my co-founders, sleepless nights working, we managed to be part of the 33 businesses that were picked out of the 158 that applied into our cohort. And then from there, we just pushed and pushed and pushed, and then continuously applied everything we've learned, created contacts, and relentlessly put in effort in order to reach our goals. So luckily, we were selected out of the 33 to be part of the incubator now for the propulsion program. And I'm actually doing this whole interview directly from our offices in Centec.
I believe, David, that's where the planetarium was, right? Is that where you're coming from, the old planetarium?
So yes, the planetarium is part of the Centec incubator. I'm actually in one of the buildings that's very close to the planetarium, where most of the startups are incubated.
Very cool. So again, please recap for us what is Living Safe and what kinds of data points that you collect on some of the people under your care, some of the seniors under your care.
So Living Safe creates a non-contact monitoring system for the senior care industry. So essentially what we do is that with our wall-mounted device, we're able to extract information like, did the person fall? Has the person been moving? Is the person in bed? How they're using their unit, their spaces, as well as really interesting things that's unique to radar, which is vital sign monitoring without the need to wear anything.
Being going back to the aspect that you're in the Centec, you said the propulsion program, that's a 24-month program. Where are you within that program right now, David?
So we're about 7 months from completing the 2-year program. So a little bit left to.
And how have you found that whole process? I guess it's probably a little different than it was maybe 2-3 years ago, given that it's a pandemic. Like, you're right now in the development phase of your product, right?
Exactly. So in our case, we incorporated our business March 9th, 2020. So a couple of days before the confinement. At the beginning, because our target clientele was so vulnerable, a lot of our meetings and all of our meetings with people, with staff, with owners were all pushed back, which we had perceived as something that could slow us down. But really, as the months went by, we realized that actually, it was kind of a blessing in disguise, because, not a lot of people really understand how, the conditions inside of care units or inside of senior establishments in general. And having a lot of media attention brought to that just basically showed how much there's a need for innovation in terms of technology inside these establishments.
Let's deal with some of the recent media attention, especially here in Quebec when it comes to seniors residences. I'm sure you've thought about this. I mean, how can your product help safety in some of these establishments?
Right. Well, to begin with, I mean, these establishments have staffing problems. It's not always the most valued job. It's difficult to retain your employees, and that turns out that they have staffing problems because of that. And then on top of that, they're very limited in the type of technological tools that could help them do their jobs, and just like help them spend more of their time dedicated to actually offering care to the residents. And that's exactly what we strive to do.
And in terms, David, of having team members in your corporation and building a culture that's going to be for long-term growth, have you had any challenges? I mean, we've talked on the show earlier about labor shortages. Has any of that stuff affected you as a startup in the Centec propulsion program?
Not at all. Not at all. We are extremely mission driven. The team for us is everything. And up to now, the team we've managed to build in the last year and a half of existence, we haven't lost one team member. It's just growing. People are dedicated every day to improving the situation. It's so inspiring, and helps so much when all of your team is mission driven. And when you see what exists and how much more you could bring to the table, then you realize it's a beautiful thing.
Could you see your product going beyond like senior care facilities? Like, I know a thought that comes to mind is with babies, having something in the home if they're in a crib. Is that something that you've thought about, or are you really just trying to channel into the senior care facility aspect?
Right. So certainly there's a lot of verticals to explore with our basic technology. However, we've dedicated ourselves entirely to senior care.
David, I have a question on ethics. A lot of people are talking about AI, data, the responsible use of data. What are your thoughts there, your policies in terms of sharing data?
Right. So, well, we, first of all, are entirely privacy oriented. From the basic choice of the sensors we use to solve the problems we were going after, we've always had emphasis on privacy. It's important to know that in our case, as we give the information to staff, well, naturally, it's important for them to know from which unit and who's in trouble, right? But once we go further than that, and we basically get data into our database, we completely render it anonymous. So we have algorithms that break the link between the data we get from the units our devices are installed in, so that it can no longer be retraced.
That's really great to hear. I don't think Facebook takes such steps to anonymize our data.
No, definitely not. But you opted into it once you've accepted their terms of service.
Final thought, David, where is this business going? Where do you see yourself in 10 years? And where could you look to expand?
That's a good question. Well, with the aging population and this happening all around the world, we believe that this is a global opportunity. We think that really Quebec is an amazing place to start for us, not only from all the resources that we have around us, but also from the demographic and the cultural decisions that we took, putting a lot of seniors into big buildings. That gives us a very nice place to start, refine our technology, optimize it in order to really be able to expand across Canada, into the US, into Europe, where we've already had some traction, and possibly into the Asian markets as well.
And R&D wise, what other sorts of data or conditions would you want to track in the future?
Well, that's kind of the beauty, right? In this type of technology, it's once you're installed in many units and you start receiving good data that you've cleaned, that you've labeled, then the possibilities become huge. You're able to not only optimize all of the functionalities you have to make them more performant, improve the services that we're able to give to establishments, to residents, to seniors, to their families, but you're really able to push and better understand their needs and use that data into a preventative aspect. So how are you able to use what you've learned in order to predict certain outcomes and therefore adapt care in order to prevent certain outcomes?
That's really awesome. Yours, quick final thought?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, hopefully, stuff like this is going to be incentivized for care facilities, because presumably it's a cost for them to take on, but long term it would save them costs in terms of responsibility, labor requirements, and having people do these types of tasks manually versus it being somewhat automated and more efficient. But I think that battle in between current costs with long term benefit is something that hopefully someone's going to step in from a government perspective and hopefully subsidize some of this stuff for the care facilities for the long-term good for the people that need the care.
David, thanks so much. You're going to hang around. We're going to have your one piece of advice for today's entrepreneur on the way. They do smart monitoring for senior care, so that's on the way. But first, speaking of end-of-life care, we're going to chat now with our FL expert. Sarah Halleckman is the expert on estates and trusts. Welcome to the show, Sarah.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'll jump right in, Dan. I'm curious. I want to maybe have Sarah explain to the listeners, what can someone do to get their affairs in order and to ensure a smooth estate plan for their family?
So there are some really simple things that can be done to ensure your affairs are in order for your family, which is really of the utmost importance. Like, really, we're aiming to just make everything simple for your family in a time that's very emotionally difficult. At the end of the day, the last thing you want is for your family to be guessing what your wishes may have been. So first and foremost, the most important is to really have an up-to-date will that outlines all of your final wishes. So your will really serves as an outline of the distribution of your assets among family and loved ones. It'll direct any charitable bequests you may want, and it can also stipulate other instructions such as funeral arrangements. So what also can be really important in addition to having a will is preparing a mandate, which is really helpful in cases of illness or incapacity. And again, this really just serves to ensure that your wishes are made clear to your loved ones should kind of that situation arise, and especially again during the time that can be really emotionally charged. The other thing I'll mention is when you're preparing a will, it can be really, really key to inform your executors. Obviously, when you're preparing a will, you're asked to choose an executor or executors, and letting those individuals know in advance what their role will be, what they'll be expected to do, can really reduce delays, reduce shock as well for people that didn't know they were going to be called upon to kind of be responsible to get things going. And finally, the last thing you can do is having a personal balance sheet, or really, I call it a personal balance sheet, but really just a list of your personal assets, such as your bank accounts, your investment portfolios with various banks and brokers, details of properties you own, location of security deposit boxes, anything of the sort. Really having that itemized can really help your family members and or your executors, when the time comes.
Definitely, Sarah. I think that's the huge factor at the end there that you mentioned with respect to having a personal balance sheet and letting those close to you sort of understand really the dynamics of, what assets you have and what liabilities may be present. So they're not left surprised. Does everyone need a will, Sarah? What happens if someone passes away without a will?
So in short, yes, absolutely. And I say this all the time, every adult should absolutely have a will. Even more important, specifically, anybody who owns a property, anybody who owns a business, if you have a partner, if you have children, specifically anybody that falls into any of those categories, 1000% needs a will. A lot of people think that their assets are really simple. Everything will just kind of fall into place, nothing complicated. I don't need a will. The truth is, without a will, there are so many potential unintended consequences that you would have never wanted. You would have never wanted for your family. As a resident of Quebec, it's super important to draft your will with a notary, because that will help avoid the will needing to be approved by the courts, which can cause other delays. But back to kind of the unintended consequences. In general, I know no one is seeking out reminders of their mortality, that they won't be around forever, but it's so much scarier to not have a will than to have one. So firstly, for example, if you have a common law spouse, they may not have any rights to your property without a will, which can obviously really complicate things for someone who has considered themselves your spouse for your entire partnership. If you're married, depending on whether you have children or surviving parents, those children or surviving parents may be entitled to portions of your estate, which can complicate things for your partner. And even worse, if you have children who haven't reached the age of majority, it's possible the public curator will step in to potentially manage their inheritance, to potentially name a guardian in the case that they don't have a surviving parent. I've seen stories, I've lived it with clients where there's a surviving parent, the public curator steps in, the surviving parent has to provide reporting to how the inheritance is being spent on the children. It's a ton of administration, a ton of headaches. Without a will, things can be complicated if you have children from separate marriages or a spouse that's not the parent of your children, rather. So really, on top of all those things, then there's negative tax consequences as well.
Sarah Halleckman, she is the Estates and Trust Specialist at FL Montreal. Thanks very much, Sarah.
Pleasure.
And it's time, as we end the program, to turn to David Landry, the co-founder of Living Safe, and ask David, your one piece of advice for today's entrepreneur, sir.
If you believe in what you're doing and you have not gotten the signs that tell you that it's not possible, stay gritty, don't give up, and let's change the world together.
Awesome. Love it. Thank you, David. And congratulations on being one of those darling SendTech companies, and best of luck with the future.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much, guys. Thanks for the experience, and I'll learn a lot from this. So hopefully the next time I'll get even better and better.
Thanks,
you
David.
did great.
Yeah.
Euros, final thoughts. Very impressive young entrepreneur in the program today.
Yeah, super impressive, Dan. And honestly, great job, David. I think it's a fantastic product. I look forward for it coming to in senior care facilities. I think one of the important things you said in terms of developing a business and developing the product is stick to the game plan. You have to pivot in some respects when there's circumstances that come about. But you made a point into, where you're going, what the niche market is that you want to focus on. You're building a team around you that you care about, that care about what you're doing, that you're giving them the ability to grow within your company. I think all of that stuff is super important and is the right recipe for a successful company. So kudos to you, David, and thanks a lot for taking the time to come on the show.
Thank you, David. And thanks, Euros, for being back co-hosting today. And next time on today's Entrepreneur, we'll be chatting with Kamal Shah from Tremblant Elysium, a unique concept of luxury vacation rentals in the heart of Eastern North America's #1 ski resort, near where I'm from, Mont Tremblant. Very excited for the show. Thanks again, Euros and David, for being on the program today. Euros, you'll be guest hosting soon. Mike will be back shortly. Next week, Ernie Furt, tax partner at FL, will guest host with me again today. But Mike will be along very shortly. I'll be back, of course. We miss Mike. And don't forget, you can head over to today'sentrepreneur.org for hundreds of local entrepreneur profiles dating back 13 years here on the program, and subscribe on iHeartRadio, iTunes, or your favorite platform. Thanks very much, and we'll see you back here next week.
This has been a production of TNKR Media. Good talk.